You should be building technology that solves a problem, not makes more.
Yeah. So on that then, come on, in a consumer context, what are the kind of classic use cases or problems that AR solves?
I don't think I've ever been so scared about losing my job in my entire life. I've ridden through waves of layoffs. I've seen awful things happen. I've done stupid things. I've this up real bad. You then have to get on the train with the founders of the company and your boss and go all the way back to Leeds, knowing that the discovery client is going the opposite direction. In a sort of metaphorical, like, the pitch is disappearing from your hands.
Welcome to Embracing Marketing Mistakes, the only podcast for senior marketing professionals that celebrates the biggest mistakes and fails, helping you learn practical lessons from other people's misfortune. Also, you can double your return on investment and achieve record revenue. In this week's episode, Will and I are joined by the very, very entertaining Jed Hallam, who is the Global Head of Strategy Arcadia at Snap, e.g. Snapchat. But he has an exclusive for us today that he's going to reveal in the show. Jed is obsessed with culture, community, common people and creativity. He's also the co-founder of Common People, which he covers, and he's the co-founder of Love Will Save the Day FM. He's a keen runner, a reader, a writer, and a self-professed culture obsessive. Prior to working for Snapchat, he was CSO at Initiative, helping rebuild the agency, before being head of strategy at Mindshare, and before that he was the planner at VCCP, digitising its entire planning department. And to top it all off, I actually gave Jed his first job in marketing after he threatened me and the team to hire him as part of a role. So I'll leave that till later in the show. I know you're going to enjoy this episode because Jed shares a brilliant up from me and him back in the day. So as always, sit back, relax, and let's hear how you can improve your brand marketing without having to spend hours and hours learning from your own mistakes. This week, we have a good friend of mine. He is the Global Head of Strategy for Arcadia, Snap, a.k.a. Snapchat, or was. Hi, Jed. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Chris. Thanks for having me. How enigmatic. What an introduction.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
we've really hooked the audience in now, haven't we?
I've pulled them right in. So, Jed, why don't you tell us about what you were doing for Snapchat and what you've been doing while you've been there? And just give us a bit of a lowdown on what it's all about at Snapchat at the moment.
Yeah, so I went to work at Snapchat. So, Chris, obviously you and I met about 1,000 years ago when there was dinosaurs roaming the earth. And since then, spent a bunch of time at creative agencies, media agencies, in various different strategy roles. And ended up, I walked into the agency at one time and I looked around. I was 34, I think I was. And I looked around the agency and I genuinely felt like I was the oldest person in the world. And there was nobody around me, bar my boss at that time, who was like the UK CEO of IPG. There was nobody around me that was like older. And I just kind of thought, maybe this is, I'm ready for the glue factory.
Right.
Where do I go from here? Like, what do I end up doing? And I was a planner. Still am a planner. And it was just, I didn't really know where I was supposed to go. And so I started having conversations with people that weren't agencies. I had a bit of Stockholm syndrome, thinking that being a planner meant you could only ever work in an agency. And I thought that's some kind of, strategist planner. That's where you belong. And so I started having conversations with a few different places about where could be interesting, and Snapchat came up, and Chris, you'll remember this from when we spent a lot of time together. I've got opinions, and lots and lots of opinions.
You have,
and some of them I hold quite strongly about certain technology companies, and so there was only really a few that I was thinking about talking to.
Yeah.
And I'd heard from a couple of friends that like going to a tech platform was an interesting experience, and there was loads of different types of stuff you'd get to work on. And like as a planner, all you really sort of like want to do is basically fix problems in new ways, old problems fixed in new ways. It's kind of it, really. So this guy from Snapchat called up and basically said, I've got a favour to ask you. We've got this role. It's a bit nebulous. It's called like EMEA Head of Comms Planning. And we're not, I know that we need this person, this type of skill in the business, but that's about as much as we've got. Do you know anyone that'd be interested? I was like, is there a job spec? And he was like, no. And I was like, this sounds insane. Like, you're going to have to get a very specific person. It definitely sounds like it's
for you, though. Because there's no
I was like,
chuck you in.
Yeah, I was like, I know one person that would be really interested in this. Only one person. You're talking to him. So I went to meet a bunch of different people. I did this sort of very typical tech company thing of like I could be interviewed by about 900 different people. And it was just really interesting. There was just loads of going on, and like there was loads of interesting stuff where like there was old problems that no one had been able to fix. And Snapchat is renowned for being like one of the world's most creative companies. It's the company where like they invent the that everybody else then goes off and copies. It still happens today. Like it's kind of amazing that they don't get more frustrated about it, to be honest with you. And so I was like, well, it's a great environment to go and work in, and if these people can't fix some of these problems and I can, then that's like that's a good challenge. So I ended up going in. Yeah, I ended up joining 6 months later after what I thought was going to be a really dreamy 6 months of gardening leave, but was so boring. It was insanely boring to just sit around doing nothing. I didn't end up sitting around doing nothing, but yeah, just really, really boring. So I went in and helped around product placement, advertise, like repositioning the brand for advertisers, starting to think about like how we put together sales packages. I just basically wandered around trying to make myself useful. Because I think on some of the conversations that we were having beforehand, like what are the mistakes that you've made when it comes to jobs? And I'm like, to your point, Chris, like I'm not like a job spec person, which a lot of people would see as a pretty drastic mistake of not getting clarity on what you're expected to do in order to measure your success in the role that you're doing.
Yeah.
But I've always kind of believed that if you just wander around just asking questions and trying to fix things, that eventually you might fix some stuff, and that's useful and valuable.
I actually still tell the story of how I recruited you you recruited me essentially years and years ago. I still tell that story to execs now about how you got my attention out of all the CVs we used to get. Do you actually remember what it was?
I do, and I think I've only just stopped cringing.
You basically, it was in the very early days of and Will's probably heard this story. Have I told you this story before, Will, or not?
I don't think so, no.
So basically, Jed, we were agency of the year. We were winning loads of awards where I was working previously, where me and Jed met. But basically, Jed sent an email through to our recruiter alias or whatever, saying I would like to work here. And nothing happened. So then what he did was he went out on Twitter, very early days. We were like some of the first people on Twitter. And he went and connected to everybody who was key. So in the PR sphere, it was like Stephen Waddington and all the big hitters, wasn't it? You went out to various people and connected to them all and built a community. I can't remember if it was on Facebook. And it was called 10 Reasons Why insert agency name should hire Jed Hallam for this position, and it was like 1, 2, 3, and it was to Chris Norton, and it was the 10 reasons, and he got all these big hitters in this community, so he demonstrated he could build a community online. And then it was like 10 reasons. I can't remember 9 of them, but the final one was, and 10 is because if he doesn't hire me, I'm going to hire a fucking barbershop quartet to sing these 9 to him in the office. And I was like, we've got to get this guy in the office. We didn't even have a job. We've got to get this guy in. And so that's how me and Jed met. And there you go. No job spec. Classic.
I had actually found a barbershop quartet in Leeds as well that I was legit having conversations with. I was like, I think it was like my last 80 quid. And I was like, if I'm spending 80 quid, it's going on this. I'm going to like live to my word on this.
I mean, brilliantly creative. So what happened next? Back to Snapchat.
So also, just to add one point of context as well, so people don't think I'm some sort of tragic character. I graduated in 2007, so I was coming into the job market in 2008, which, as many of you will remember, was not a particularly cheery time for getting a job as a grad.
No.
And there was like something ridiculous, like 1,000 applications for every single job. So yeah, I went to Snapchat on this no job spec job. I had like a really, really good 6 months of just like wandering around, like metaphorically wandering around, because this was in lockdown, just basically going, hey, have you looked at this? Like it'd be like this sort of like like the sort of metaphorical equivalent of like a broken vending machine, and going, oh, that doesn't look very good. Should we see if we can fix that? I was just wandering around whether it was like the World Cup sales strategy or whether it was like the global brand positioning for Snap. just trying to be helpful.
Yeah.
And 6 months in, I got an email from my boss's boss's boss to say, I'd like to have a chat with you. And I was like, oh, I knew this was coming at some point. I knew this was going to happen. I've been rumbled. It's only taken 16 years, but I've been bloody rumbled. And so I went and sat down with this incredible woman called Jeremy Gorman, who was the chief business officer at Snap at the time. And she basically said, look, you're doing a great job. I'd like to bring you into like a different type of role. And I was like, okay. She's like, and she proceeded to then give me like another non-job spec job, which was come in and help set up Arcadia, which was the sort of Google Labs equivalent of Snapchat. It was entirely focused on working with partners, brands, to create AR experiences that sort of revolutionized how their business worked. That was the sort of premise. It was set up by, the original idea came from Evan and Bobby, who are still like super involved in the running of the company. And they thought that this was like Arcadia was like a sort of great idea at leading the way. Like I think the line that I came up with in the meeting that kind of stuck was like, if Snapchat is the rocket ship that's powering AR, then Arcadia is the nose cone. Like it's the thing that's right at the front doing all of the sort of like really cutting edge stuff. Mm-hmm. And that line kind of stuck. So yeah, then I spent 2 years there, really, working on different projects, working with people like Coke, with Disney, who else we worked with, like L'Oreal, Nike, Orange, like a bunch of different advertisers, Lego, like just...
What kind of things were you doing? Obviously, they're all big blue chip consumer brands. Everybody's heard of them. What sort of stuff were you doing with them? Like making augmented reality lenses, things like that?
Yeah, so it's less lenses and more like how can... Because AR is one of those things, like it's like spatial computing, right? So if you think about like every technology goes through this similar sort of cycle where it gets introduced, it feels like a bit of a novelty, and then everyone kind of stops paying attention. And while no one's paying attention, there's a bunch of people that are working on it to try and figure out what's actually useful for. So the phone went through this where like people were like, well, no one's got a fucking phone. Who am I going to phone? Like when the phone first got, like, who are you phoning? No one else has got a bloody phone, so who are you phoning?
They had one in Downton Abbey.
but who are they phoning? Like no one else has got a bloody phone. No, yeah. And then slowly but surely people go like, it's a novelty to call someone up and hear someone's voice down the phone. Same with the newspaper, same with the printing press, same with the mobile phone, same with it like the internet. Like this shit when it first gets announced and it gets launched, people go, well, that's just a joke. And then slowly but surely, you can see this happening now with Metaverse, you can see it happening with VR, you can see it happening with AI to a degree as well. Like, stuff gets launched, people get really, really excited about transforming the world, then it looks like it's just a bit novelty, and then everyone disappears onto the next big thing. But when they disappear onto the next big thing, all of the work starts to actually happen to make this stuff useful. And that's what we were doing at Arcadia. So the work with Coca-Cola that we were doing, I remember being in a meeting with the global CMO of Coke, and towards the end, we were pitching some ideas around Coke Studio, and like it was really interesting stuff. And towards the end of the meeting, you're doing that sort of like wrapping up the meeting in person, where everyone's kind of like emptying the last dregs of coffee and putting their laptop away. And the global CMO of Coke comes over and he's like, "I've always thought that we could do something really interesting with the vending machines that we've got." And I was like, "Oh yeah," it's like kind of being a bit like, "Oh yeah. Do you? Vending machines, really exciting." And then he said to me, we've got 72 million of them that we own. They're all Wi-Fi connected and smart, so you can put things in them. Like you can track inventory and you can they're all Wi-Fi connected, so you can keep them connected to the internet. And the penny sort of dropped that we could do. Rash, my boss, and me were like both staring at each other, just having exactly the same thought, which is like, that's like a massive new media network for Coke that if you could do something interesting with, could create, like, vending machines are absolutely everywhere. There's 72 million of them. There's literally a vending machine. I reckon you probably come into contact, well, we did the research, you come into contact with 12 vending machines a day on average, but you probably pay attention to none of them. So there's there's this massive sort of network. And so we took it away and started to kind of like think about what you could do with the vending machine and technology. And we bought a vending machine. So like, well, let's play around with it. And we then built a prototype vending machine that was like, the entire front screen, the entire front of the vending machine was a screen. and we put a camera in it, and then we changed all the software in the back. We changed the form factor for the vending machine, and we turned it into effectively a giant AR experience where you could it was all hands-free. You could vend a Coke, but you could play games. You could try on exclusive Coke merch and stuff like that, with the idea being that what would happen then is slowly over the course of the next few years, Coke would roll these out around the world. So you'd have every Coke vending machine would be a hands-free, interactive, immersive experience. So it's that sort of stuff. It's the slightly sideways briefs.
I can see, massive companies working with you guys to deliver really kind of cool, exciting activations and things. From a kind of consumer perspective, how many people are actually on Snapchat? Because for me, it's one of those platforms. A few years ago, everybody was talking about it, and we often have conversations with our clients that, particularly in kind of higher education, so very much that kind of Gen Z audience, and they say, look, we know people are on it, but we just don't know really how to get into it. So, I mean, from a consumer perspective, how many people are actually on it and actively using it in the UK and globally?
Oh, God. So because the bit of the business that I worked in was focused purely on kind of innovation, it's been a while since I've seen the stats. I don't think I can give you accurate absolute numbers, and it also grows at a ridiculous rate as well.
I suppose, I mean, we don't need specifics. I'm just curious, so... in a high street in Shoreditch, you've got a Coke vending machine. How many people are going to walk past it with Snapchat on their phone and actually use it?
That's
I
a good
suppose.
question. Yeah.
And here is hopefully a good answer. What we were doing was not stuff that was just purely for Snapchat. It was stuff that you could experience, anybody could experience. So our sort of objective really was bring AR out into the world, not bring people into Snapchat.
Okay.
Right. Okay.
And so everything that we built really, we built a bunch of experiences for, there's a L'Oreal Gen Z brand called NYX, which is their sort of marquee Gen Z brand. And we built effectively a digital assistant that was beauty focused. And so every day it would learn more about you and your preferences for different beauty trends. It would surface different ideas for things for you to try. It would let you try on things. And the original idea with that and the sort of the sort of North Star on it was, how do we bring this into the vanity mirrors in the NYX stores rather than how do we get more people using Snapchat? Because there's a bunch of people that are super, super experienced and highly skilled and talented at bringing people into Snapchat. Snapchat still grows faster in almost all markets than TikTok, and has done since day dot. It is a massive, massive sleeping giant. But far outdwarfs Twitter and TikTok.
Fucking hell, anything outdwarfs Twitter right now, doesn't it? Unfortunately, it was our tool of choice at one time. Because Snapchat is predominantly Gen Z. Like Will said there, it's it says 18 to 24-year-olds, but it's 13 to 24-year-olds, would you say? What has the demographic changed? Is it shifting to older people on Snapchat as well, using it? Because I think what Will was getting at is we're noticing that not... the big companies use it, like you're talking about the innovations, but for small businesses, we don't see tons of small businesses using Snapchat to do social media marketing, if you know what I mean. Is that fair?
They'd default to TikTok every time, wouldn't they?
They default to TikTok or Instagram. Do you know what I mean?
I think there's a few things it's probably important to point out. So it's aged up quite considerably. So the people that joined Snap, that when it first launched 12 years ago, largely stayed with it. There's some dips in usage, I'm sure, but in general, it's aged up and brought more people in. I think there's a sort of pretty fundamental difference between Snapchat and a lot of the other social media apps, in the sense that Snapchat was born out of a desire. Bobby and Evan, so I think Evan's 3 years younger than me, something like that. When they were coming through college and university, a lot of the major social platforms were around. And if you went to a party and you did something stupid, it was captured and it was, everybody could see it and comment on it and share it. And everything felt like it was on show.
Yeah.
And the reason for opening, for creating Snapchat in the very, very beginning was they wanted to try and find some way that would replicate the ephemerality of a conversation. So when you and I used to have a chat in the office, Chris. If some of those things would have been recorded, we would be deeply embarrassed about them. Whether they were like nerdy conversations or whether they were stupid conversations. Yeah. But like the beauty of friendship and the beauty of community is that like not everything is left to be able to be poured over again at some point in the future. Like, I think the sort of living your life constantly in public is terrifying. And then when you start to get into the world of feeds, of competitive liking, of comments, like we can see what's happening in society. People are turning away from the places that have feeds, places that have likes and comments, because it's damaging. Like these sorts of functions are the equivalent of like being in a casino. Like they're bright lights. They're built to trigger like a dopamine response. It's the same as addiction. It's the same as cocaine. It's the same as gambling. It's the same as sex. It's the same as booze. Like they are built to keep you staring at them and not paying attention to what time it is, what time of day it is. I'm sure we've all done it, but you've also seen people. I got into running a few years ago, so I spend a lot of time like trying not to fall over. And when you're out running, you see people walking towards you, and they are so locked into their phone that even as you get closer and closer to them, no headphones on, just staring into their phone, even with a sort of like a physical presence, they're still staring at the phone. And it's not until you're past them, 25, 30, 40 metres down the road, that they turn around and they've noticed something, because they're just locked into this sort of this death stare, effectively. And Snapchat doesn't have a lot of those features. It was built to try and counter a lot of those things. So there are stats, and this is global, so they're market by market. There are stats that show that in comparison to other platforms, I think it's 94% was the last stat that I saw, but 94% of Snapchatters say they feel happy when they're using the service versus angry or anxious or depressed or sad. And the stats for, and I'm not naming them by name because that would be very unprofessional, but the stats for the other platforms are in the single digits.
Yeah.
Because people don't want to feel like they've wasted 45 minutes staring into 60 different videos of somebody, I don't know, whatever it is. Like, shit's like McDonald's for your brain.
What I found interesting was you talked about the ephemerality of Snapchat. So before Instagram Stories launched, which is obviously the 24-hour ephemeral content feature.
Copycat of Snapchat.
But Gen Z users were actually deleting their feed posts, weren't they? And they're actually going back and delete that. So they were manually creating an ephemeral feed. And I find that fascinating that obviously Snapchat started that, and there's obviously a demand for that.
Jed, so before we forget, right, the whole point of this show is about everybody listening to the show are in marketing, right? There's some senior marketers, some people starting out. And the point of the show is marketing fuck-ups and failures, things that you've learned from, things that you've done wrong that A, are quite funny, and B, that you've learned from. And I know a couple of things from you, which and I'm not even sure we can broadcast some of them. So I just wondered if you've got anything you can share with our listeners that would make for a good mistake that you can share.
I have got fucking loads of these, as you very well know, and I mean, I made the joke years ago that like I think my life is kind of like best described as like a collection of mistakes, just connected by apologies from one to the other of some stupid stuff that I've done. My favourite one, and the one that I talk about all the time, was when I was working with you, and I got given my first pitch. And I was so excited, and I was like, "Oh my god, this is like big time!" Because when I joined like the agency, I was like, "Right, you've made it. This is the best job you're ever going to have in your entire life. Don't fuck it up." And so I put a lot of pressure on myself not to get fired. Unfortunately, I mean, I don't know if it's a reflection on you or me, but I didn't get fired in that time that I was working.
No, you were good. Do you remember the giant shoe?
I mentioned that giant shoe reference on such a regular basis, and also interestingly, the place that I went to work post us working together, there was also a very creative like lead who at one point mentioned doing a giant shoe, and I honestly swear to God, I asked him if you'd spoken to you, and he was like, "What?"
I feel like you owe us an explanation for the giant shoe, Jed. You can't leave that one dangling.
Well, that's not his mistake, but that's probably my mistake. We were basically in a brainstorm, and we were coming up with a campaign. It was the days of
It was not a brainstorm, it was every brainstorm.
Yeah, and we used to do it as a joke. So we'd get into a brainstorm, and then if we couldn't come up with... Because we were doing cutting-edge social media when social media was brand new. 2008 is what you're talking about, Credit Crunch. But we were doing, like, campaigns with what can we do to launch... And I can't remember which trainer brand it was. And we were like, we could do this cutting-edge parkour, the world champion diving off a building, rolling video, cut out to a, whatever. And then it was like, we could just create a giant shoe and float it down the Thames. And it was always this idea that we used in every brainstorm to make everyone laugh and move on.
And ironically, that would have probably worked better than a cutting-edge social idea half the time.
100%. And I remember, I can't remember who it was, but a few years later... somebody did it, because it happens on a regular basis now, and I think Lush did it a few years ago where they rolled a tank through like Oxford Street, and it's like, it's just the giant fucking shoe. It's become such a go-to for me where I'm like, it's just a giant shoe.
Anyway,
that's all it is. No one else gets the reference. Yeah, so and it was K-Swiss was the client.
Oh right, yeah, K-Swiss.
Yeah, and the guy who was the K-Swiss ambassador at the time for them, the parkour guy, then went on to be one of the actors in one of the James Bond films. You know the scene where he like jumps from one crane to another?
Oh yeah.
Same dude.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Again, another moment where I was sat there, I was going, it's just giant shoe, dude.
The giant shoe.
It's not the giant shoe, dude.
They don't get that.
Yes, sorry. So I would have been like 20, 22, 23, like proper whippersnapper, had been bugging the founders of the agency and you for ages about leading a pitch and was super excited about it. Put loads of work in, like intentionally like burning the candle at every bloody end. Like there was just a puddle of wax on the floor by the end of it. Very, very excited. It was for Discovery Channel. It was like a big marquee, like holy shit, this could be amazing, like game changer for like the work and for the agency, and there's loads of money, and like this will be front page of like PR week. So like spent like 3 weeks putting together so much stuff, like really like felt like proud of the work, got on the train to go to, because they were in Chiswick, got on the train, like everything's really good, everything's going perfect, like lots of nervous energy. Get to Chiswick, all of the team are like really hyped up, everyone's had about 30 coffees, and so everyone's kind of like vibrating around and really excited. And I go over to the reception, I was like, could you let Claire know that we're here for the pitch, the social media pitch? She goes, yeah, I'll just call her, just take a seat and I'll come over shortly. Just go and sit down. And we're all getting a bit excited. Everyone's like chatting, it's a bit sort of like bantery. And then I get a call from Nat, who is one of the account execs, and she said, Discovery have just got here to see you. And I was like, amazing. And I like looking around and I can't see anyone. And then the penny dropped that Nat was in Leeds and that we had asked Discovery, or I had asked Discovery to come to the Leeds office for the pitch.
That is painful.
Yeah.
So
and we were
what did you do
300 miles away.
And also you'd ask them to leave London and go to the north, which is never well received, is it?
I think I don't think I've ever felt so terrified. I've ridden through waves of layoffs. I've seen awful things happen. I've done stupid things. I don't think I've ever been so scared about losing my job in my entire life. And all the way, because obviously then, because it's not just the moment where you're like, I fucked this up real bad. You then have to get on the train with the founders of the company and your boss and go all the way back to Leeds, knowing that the Discovery client is going the opposite direction in a sort of metaphorical, like the pitch is disappearing from your hands in literal real time.
You should have said, we'll meet you in Peterborough.
Could you imagine? Go, yeah, we'll see you in Grantham. We've found like a real nice greasy spoon in Grantham.
Upper crust in Grantham.
Oh, God.
So I take it you didn't get it.
We did. So we went down the week after, reorganised the meeting, went down the week after, and it was like one of the most fun accounts I think I've ever worked on. Met Bear Grylls, met Stephen Hawking, like launched like programs for. It's just so good. And actually, ironically, one of the clients, I thought he thought I was a real dick when would be, forgiven for thinking some of those things. One, because it's largely true, and two, because of the environment in which we'd started our relationship. But I actually stayed in touch with him, and he was one of the co-founders of the radio station that we launched last year. And so there's it's just this sort of, that moment was like this catastrophe, but has kind of led on to a bunch of different things that have been really good. And the sort of the learning that I came out of with all of that, sorry, it's a very American way of putting it. Like, the thing that I learned off the back of that was you might be the planner and you might be the strategist and you might be the one that everyone thinks is a bit fucking weird and wacky and wild. But if you don't get your details pat down, it's not worth shit. You can be the sort of the weirdest person in the office. You can have the biggest, best creative ideas and strategic ideas. But if you can't remember where you're supposed to be for the fucking meeting, none of it matters.
I saw somebody quoted the other day, and it was you can be as creative as you want and come up with as many ideas as you can, but the power of creativity isn't in the idea; it's in the fucking execution. So if you can't
100%.
Execute the idea, there's loads of people with loads of ideas, but if you can't execute the idea, i.e. turn up to the pitch.
It's also about legitimizing an idea, isn't it? Because, you could get someone off the street to come up with an amazing idea for Coca-Cola, but they can't walk into Coca-Cola's office and pitch it because they've got no legitimacy, have they? So it's that kind of legitimizing an idea as well. It's interesting.
Because what's fascinating, the more planners that I met and the more creatives that I met, you would often meet people, and in general, they tended to be white middle class dudes who would say, "Oh yeah, I'm no good at a lot of that sort of admin stuff, the logistic stuff." And what it is not that they're no good at it. They think it's beneath them, and they think it's something that they shouldn't waste their time on. And what the discovery thing taught me is you've got to look after your own fucking details. Look after the seconds, and the hours look after themselves. Don't worry about that shit. And so when I see people now, they're like, "Oh yeah, we've got an EA for that," or I don't really look after my own diary. I need someone to I need a suit or a client person to take me to meetings and make sure I get there on time. I'm like, you're lazy, and it will come through in your work, and I know it. So I'm not working with you.
Definitely got opinions, you say.
So, so that was a great fuck up, by the way. I enjoyed that, and it kind of going
to make a snippet and a half. Jed,
it kind of made my blood run cold because I feel like I've been so.
I'm reliving it now. I've told that story so many times.
I've been so close to that myself.
I've told the giant shoe story loads of times as well.
So, coming back to AR, because I found that really interesting. So. And AR, again, it's one of those things I feel like we've been talking about for ages, and you occasionally see these really cool big brand activations doing cool experimental AR stuff. But is it fair to say AR's tipped? Is it now a mainstream concern, or is it still that kind of niche, innovative thing that only the coolest of brands, edgiest of brands are doing? What's your view on that?
There's a lot of museums using it.
Yeah, do you know what? I should have prefaced everything that I say about AR and Snapchat as the fact that I left like a couple of months ago, and so it's all personal opinions rather than professional opinions. I think my sort of personal opinion on AR is the Apple Vision Pro headset is a big step forwards, because again, it follows a sort of curve. It's a bit like when the watch came out, and a bit like when the phone came out, to be honest with you. Everyone goes "Oh, it's amazing," and then there's no apps for it. And so there's a sort of moment where you're like, "It's amazing, I can use it as a calculator." And it's I had one of those, what's that, PSION, the Palm Pilot things. I had a fucking calculator on it as well. It was shit. And then the apps come through, and then the usage slowly trickles through, and before you know it, it's integrated and embedded in the fabric of everyday life. But I think these things take time. I remember having a conversation with, I think it was Philip Sheldrake. This is about 10 years ago. And we were talking about what social media as a sort of technology was doing to people's brains. And the sort of the popular narrative at the time, which was definitely across all of the trade press and in a lot of pitch decks, was social media's fundamentally changing people's attention spans. And I remember sort of going along with this and being "Oh yeah, it's real bad, isn't it? It's terrible." And then Philip Sheldrake sat talking to me at dinner, and he was like, "That's not how evolution works. Evolution takes place over hundreds of thousands of years. It's why we've still got little fucking fingers. We don't use little fingers. They're slowly but surely disappearing. They have no functional benefit. But it takes time for those things to change, and your neurological makeup is exactly the same." And I think sorry, that seems like a real roundabout way of saying, I think what happens is these technologies get introduced, and it takes time for people to learn what they're to be used for. You can put all the use cases in the world, and you can do some like incredible things that push the boundaries of what people think is possible. But until it starts to become like my mum using it to scan a bus stop to see what time the next bus is, like with a live, like until that sort of stuff happens, it kind of doesn't really take hold. The reason why I think the Vision Pro headset is a game changer is because we'll just start to see it more. Like when you can physically see like an embodiment of a culture, which is the headset. Like it's the same as with the white earbuds and the original iPod. Like when you can see something on a regular basis, it has tangibility, and to your point, but like it's got legitimacy all of a sudden. And so while it looks ridiculous now seeing people on the tube with a fucking Apple Vision Pro headset on looking like they're like doing some sort of cooking lesson, slowly but surely it will just become normal. And then when it's normal, you'll have like, it's a game changer. And the white AirPods is probably one of the biggest technology innovations that I think we've ever seen, as a great example of like where a physical embodiment of a technology became very, very, very quickly adopted because people could just see it. So I think that's
I've got two words for you. I've got two words for you, Jed. Google Glass.
Yeah, do you know what Google Glass got killed by, in my mind, was that dude who took a shower with it on and then posted the picture to Twitter, because there's nothing will kill a product faster than seeing some dude use it, like waxing lyrical about how incredible it is in his shower. Like it was just the
Yeah, no one needs to see that, do they?
What Jed in the shower?
I'm trying to remember. I think it was Robert Scoble. I think it was like one of those first like proper like
Pioneers.
Visionary pioneers, but like, and I don't think you would mind me saying this, but like nerds, like a proper boffin. You can, and that's how easy I think it is to kill something like that.
AR technology feels like it is for big companies. How can small companies make the most of AR and Snapchat, for instance? If you're a small brand or a small company, how can you make use of it?
Yeah, and should they care? Because it feels prohibitively complicated and expensive. From what you've said so far, so mid-level marketing manager or director that's listening to this pod, should they care? Should they try and get into it?
The sort of pitch story that we built Arcadia was unashamedly like direct. Like, if you're coming to Arcadia to build something that's jazz hands and exciting that does not have a genuine purpose in real life, then we will not work with you. And it was like one of the first conversations we'd had with people is like, we're not a fireworks factory. Like, that's not what this is about. What we want to do, and my role as like head of strat was like, what are we trying to fix? So most technology is a solution looking for a problem. Like design thinking, insights, research is so. Again, it's a broad generalization, but the skills and the industries that sit behind like insight research and like identifying actual challenges and problems is so underdeveloped. It really is. Like when we talk about like a universal challenge, often we're just talking about a business challenge, not a consumer challenge. And if you're introducing some technology to solve a business challenge, that's probably a B2B thing rather than a B2C thing. So my big push with these things is, one, there are loads and loads of different AR suppliers out there now. There's loads of little shops, big shops and little shops that will like do it, like stack it high, sell it cheap. So the cost has come down massively. You can integrate this stuff into your website. There's like web AR kits, all sorts of things like that now. So if you were, I don't know, Jim Toddy's shoe shop in Basildon, there's nothing to stop you like now going, okay, well, we've got a website and that was really expensive to put together back in the day, but actually it's really cheap to put them together now. And we can just put in like let's call camera kit, and we can just embed camera kit into the website, and you can try the shoes on at home. So you don't need to come to Jim Toddy's actual physical store. You can try the shoes on at home. So I think there's all of that comes down to like, what are you trying to use it for? Because just doing it for like, the sort of split that I think people often get slightly hung up on is there are technology companies as media platforms and technology companies as technology platforms. And as a media company, like if you're advertising on Snapchat, it's because, or Instagram or Facebook or Twitter or wherever, it's because there are people there that you'd like to see the thing that you're selling, the widget that you're selling. That's like as straightforward as it needs to be. And some people's ability to sell a widget is better than others based on context. But from a technology perspective, and we're seeing this kind of all play out with metaverse stuff and AI stuff, AR, VR, all of that stuff now, like, you should be building technology that solves a fucking problem, not makes more.
Yeah.
Like, so if you're like, if you're a company and you've got all this amazing kit, you should spend, I would say, as at least half the amount of time that you've spent building the kit as trying to figure out what the fucking thing does for humanity first.
So on that then, come on, it's probably going to be quite hard to generalize this, but in a consumer context, what are the kind of classic use cases or problems that AR solves? So I can see in a retail context, trying on sunglasses, trying on clothes or shoes, that's really compelling, isn't it? Are there any other kind of major use cases that you're seeing in consumer markets?
So there are a bunch of these, and the sort of like the business goal that we honed within our Arcadia was like, how do we demonstrate that AR can transform industries as well as consumer experiences within those industries? So there's a few. There's education's a massive one. Education, like being able to map, like use spatial computing to map information and visuals onto things. So we did this project with Orange, where when the Cathedral of Notre Dame burnt down a few years ago, Orange was a massive investor in trying to restore the Notre Dame Cathedral. And so one of the things that they spoke to us about is, can you help us to show people that, like, the iconic history and the importance of the history and cultural heritage of the Notre Dame? So we used AR to map every inch of the Notre Dame Cathedral in its old version and then rebuilt it in front of people, but showed it how it's evolved over time. So you could go to the cathedral, you could map it and the whole thing, and you'd see like its cultural significance. We also did the sort of the flip of that, which is we create a version that you could look at anywhere in the world, and it would come up in your front room, and you could walk around it and all sorts of shit like that. My favourite by long chalk is the work that we did with Live Nation. So one of the biggest universal problems that people have at live music festivals is they're dark, there is zero mobile reception, and usually, I'm not saying everybody, but usually what a lot of people may do is go and overconsume some substances, whatever those substances are. And, you'll need to go to the bathroom, or you'll go and see a different set, or you'll go and see a different artist, and then you get lost. So what we built, so we were talking to Live Nation, having a conversation with them about all the different sort of challenges that they face in building like a festival brand. Like, how do we make sure people have the best experience whatsoever? We were like, well, what's one of the biggest problems people face? And we went through like a big old list, but they were all quite like sort of like not shallow problems in a sort of like aesthetic sense. They weren't massive problems. They were just little things. And then as we were like coming out at the end of the meeting, the global head of partnerships turned and said, you know what? The one thing we've never been able to fix is helping people find their friends. And I said, yeah, wouldn't it be amazing if people were getting lost in the music rather than lost in the crowd? And from that, we then went and figured out how we could create a low latency, edge connected experience that existed on Snapchat that would point you as like a visual compass. It would take you through a crowd of people to a foot accuracy.
Wow.
So what's that, like a third of a meter? And it would help you find your friends in a low-level environment with almost no mobile reception.
Amazing. And I must admit, some of the festivals I've been to, even if I was within a foot of my friends, I still couldn't find them.
Yeah, you wouldn't be able to find it anyway. I was going to say I could have done with that at Hacienda in the late 1990s.
God.
So that's a really interesting application, because that actually can be applied in a retail environment. It can be applied in any kind of large crowd environment, couldn't it? So fascinating.
Yeah. So now you've left Snapchat. That's an exclusive for the show, right?
Yeah, so I don't know when this show airs, so it's going to be difficult to put an actual I suppose I could put dates on it. I left in early March.
Okay.
And so left Snapchat, had a couple of days off. Do you know what's really funny when you leave somewhere and someone goes, oh, you're going to take a bit of time between jobs? And you're like, how much money do you think I've got? Who's out here working, who's out here doing 2 months of just sitting around, not getting paid and paying them? Who's got that money?
Well, it's called gardening leave for a reason, Jed. Are you gardening?
I know, but Yeah, no, zero gardening for me. Absolutely zero. I'm actually looking outside. I'm in Essex at the moment, and it is tipping it down as well. No gardening for me. Yeah, so I left Snap at the start of March and joined a holding group, a new holding group at the beginning, like literally 2 days later, to set up a new company called CultureLab. And CultureLab is a technology company which is focused on mapping, quantifying, and analysing popular culture.
For what reason?
En masse.
What reason?
As you and I both know and have known for a long time, like the most iconic brands, the most successful, the most powerful brands are those ones that understand culture. They're the ones that become part of it. So whether that's Colin Kaepernick, whether that's Red Bull Music Academy, whether that's the Flug Tag, whatever it is, like the brands that we love and hold dear to our hearts are those that understand us on a more intrinsic level rather than they're like, oh, Chris, you're in your 30s. Here's what you should see in your 30s, and here's your salary bracket and your postcode. Here's what we think you should see. Like, that's bullshit. Like, that demographic stuff is just disgusting. I don't want to be anywhere near any of that stuff. And I've fucked up enough campaigns over the course of the last 15, 16 years by building them on demographics to know that it's just like throwing up at the wall and hope something will stick. And so the purpose is to help brands understand and quantify culture and what it means to them, where the opportunities are for them, how they can do things that are, more resonant and more relevant to people. Like, the world is literally filled with advertising, and a lot of it's rubbish.
Oh, a lot of it
is absolute. Yeah. Like, there was an IAB research paper came out a few years ago that showed. So in the 70s, people would be exposed to 400 ads a day. 400 pieces of advertising every single day. Now, would you like to take a guess at what number it was when they did this research a few years ago? Yeah.
400,000.
It's what a sandbagger. It's 12,000. You see 12,000 advertising.
We'll edit that out. He'll
yeah.
So you're saying that the average person sees 12,000 ads per day?
Yeah. And how many do you think they actually comprehend and take in and yeah.
So is that going up in another 10 years? Is that going to be another 4 times?
Well, everything becomes a media format, right? Like, eventually, like, if we continue in the way, and I don't think we will continue how we're continuing now, but like, the monetization of stuff invariably means turning it into an advert. And because the stuff that we put in those, media format, the stuff that we put in those media formats tend to be really boring, nondescript, non-risky, plain ads. No one's paying attention to him. But then we have like runaway brands like Lego and Google and Nike and Disney, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, and all the rest of them that create stuff which is really interesting that people pay attention to.
So what are you going to do then? What's your plan for the year then with the new role? What's your day to day?
My day to day.
So drifting around and solving problems. I bet.
Just going around going.
Yeah,
hey,
but I mean,
basically,
the
culture over there.
Trying to find some problems. Well, look, there's a massive tech build that's got to be done. So there's a bunch of different data sources that need to be pulled in. There needs to be there's a platform to be built, like a sort of Salesforce for culture, effectively. All of that stuff's got to be built. There's also a bunch of different products that we're building on the platform that have all got to be designed. There's all sorts of stuff to do. But we launched towards the beginning of April, and as part of that launch, we spoke to a few partners that we were excited to partner with on a sort of development level. So like people that can kind of contribute to the sort of product development, but also get early access to the products themselves. And so we've been working hand in hand with some of the world's biggest brands to try and figure out what's useful for them and help them really to understand like why culture, like not necessarily why it's important, but like how it can be really powerful for their brands and what they're doing and how they think about people.
So this is, I'm sure, going to pique some interest when you're talking about this. So where can people kind of find out about you, find out about your new venture and connect with you?
In other words, does jedhallam.com still exist?
It does, but I think it's dormant. I think the last time I updated it was when I was it's probably about 10 years old now. So the company's called CultureLab, and the website where you can find more information is culturelab.co. I'm Jed Hallam, and so you could always search for me, but you'll probably find some highly embarrassing photos from 2007, 2008 that the Daily Mail published of me wearing that yellow jumper. But that's because I live my life very visibly. So if anyone is interested in having a conversation, always up for trying to figure out how we can fix some problems. Just making a career out of wandering around going, I reckon if you kick that on the side, it might work again.
Yeah, thanks for coming on the show, Jed. We'll definitely have to get you on. We'll definitely have to get you back on when you've rolled out some of the products to show us, maybe give us an examples of what you've found out about culture or something to come on the show, because that'd be interesting with what marketing people could get from your new venture and CultureLabs.